Welcome, critters! I'm Clara Jones, your devoted host of the Sacred Reading CR podcast, where we discuss and examine cultural episodes, plot lines, characters, and players through the lens of sacred reading practices. This particular episode is about Campaign 1, Episode 22, Part 2, and joining me today is Petall.
Hello!
Yeah, we had some internet issues, and so I'm glad we're back rolling with this.
We sure are. Connected to the Wi-Fi here and not the Wi-Fi that is 2 floors down in this house.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's jump into the icebreaker. I switched my icebreaker list, so we're going to get a little bit of refreshing with all of this. So what is the best trip, traveling-wise, you have ever had?
Ooh. Oh, that's a tough one. I've been on some pretty good trips. I'd say it's a tie between the year I spent abroad, volunteering at a boarding school in England. Because, I mean, it's pretty hard to beat that one just because that one was like a year long and I got to go on like multiple little trips.
Yeah.
And they're including going to see like on some tours to see like the filming locations for Doctor Who and stuff like that. It was really, really awesome. And also going to Gen Con last year was a lot of fun. I got to meet some of the big D&D TikTok creators. It was really cool because one of my friends is friends with them, and so I got to meet some of them. I'm going again this year, and it's all gonna be very exciting. I had a blast.
Yeah, I mean, when I was thinking about it, it's hard to choose one trip because there's like good pieces and bad pieces with each trip, right? Like if I could just like combine all the good pieces of all the trips together into one, but that's not what the question is.
No.
So I think I would have to say also my study abroad program in London as well, because
oh wow, you also did that basically?
Yeah. I only did a semester, so it wasn't a full year. I think it was like 3 to 4 months, but at the same time, like I just love London as a city. It is a wonderful city, and like being set free on London as a 20-year-old was just like the biggest taste of freedom that I had ever had up until that point. And like I was legal drinking age, unlike in the US. It's 21 in the US. And like it was just a whole different experience of being unleashed on a city by myself and having like absolutely full control over how I spent my time as well. Like the classes that I was taking, it wasn't like a full day of classes. And so I had quite a bit of free time as a result. And so I just kind of explored around the, like, because London's huge. There's no way that you can explore it all, even in, you know, a year, 2 years, 3 years. And so there was always something new. And part of the program that I went to was connected. It was the Sotheby's Institute of Art. And so I got the behind the scenes tours on like all the art auction houses and all the art galleries. And so like I just saw a ton of stuff that was just like really, really, really cool. And in England, public museums are completely free. You don't have to pay admission. And so I just went to a ton of museums over time, and it was just great. I mean, that trip I think would have to take the best. I mean, I went to Hawaii a couple years ago, and it was a pretty great trip as well, but the person that I went with made it a little more stressful than it should have been. And so if I went back, I would probably choose the Hawaii trip if I can do Hawaii my way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's hard to choose like an overall awesome trip. But
yeah,
I think
it is hard.
Yeah. Well, we're Anglophiles over here, and that's okay.
Not very happy with the political decisions going on there. True. But I am also of the opinion that, like, I mean, there's a lot of minorities there that are really, really struggling with it. It's not the sort of thing where you can just like toss England aside and be like, oh, the entire thing is awful, let's like ignore it or whatever, because it's just some really big, loud turfs and things that are causing problems for a lot of people who really don't deserve it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit of a shit show.
Yeah.
Well, please join us as we embark on this exciting adventure in story analysis and self-reflection in order to deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. And as always, we love hearing your own insights and stories as well. So please comment, like, share, subscribe, and share. Both. I mean, why not? Hello. And yeah, let's dive on in. Vox Machina have just reconvened after being separated for 2 different contracts through the Slayers Guild in Vasselheim and spent the evening drinking in a tavern before heading to bed. The second half opens with the party waking up with a heavy hangover the next morning, and Grog rolls for his beard check successfully, while Vax takes Trinket for a walk. Tiberius gets Vex a coffee, the most hungover of them, and also finds a stall that sells small creatures. He ends up buying a tiny, sickly green dragon and introduces him to the rest of the group as Lockheed. Pike does a medicine check on the dragon, but rolls a 7 while it bites Grog's finger. Keyleth tries a medicine check successfully and feeds it a few good berries. They chat a bit about their plans for the journey to Pyrah, with Keyleth seeming very nervous about it all, saying that she doesn't want to inconvenience anyone. They try and reassure her, but Keyleth says, sometimes learning about your past is equally as terrifying. I don't know what I'm going to find. She tells them that they are to head south towards Thunder Peak, and Vex flags down someone in the tavern who happens to be a cartographer, very helpfully, to ask how far the mountain is. Told that it's about 2 days on horseback. They ask him if they can have his map, and he says no, because he still needs to finish it. Grog asks him what his girlfriend's name is, which makes the cartographer very confused, and Vex asks if they could gather information for him. He says that that would be very helpful, giving his name as Tyriok. Pike asks what happens when they don't stay on the road, and he says they might get attacked. He hands Vex some parchment for her to take notes for him while they travel, and then they leave, deciding to leave the horses that half the group bought for their trip to and from the White Dragon's lair. They have to buy 2 more in order to accommodate all of them. And Vex sweet talks the horse seller, rolling a natural 20. She gets 1 for half price, while Tiberius pays full price for another. She warns him that if he keeps using party funds, she might not be as willing to give them in the future. And he reassures her that he's using his own money, which satisfies her. They exit the city and take the road leading to the southwest, leading them deep into the Vesper Timberlands. It is heavily canopied route, where it seems like those who use the route must constantly work to keep the road clear of plant life. As they reach the evening and the sun sets, Tiberius casts light, but Vex warns him that she's concerned that his light source might be attractive to certain creatures, so he puts it out. He decides instead to cast it on the underside of Vax's stealthy cloak to turn it into more of a hooded lantern type of light. They decide to stop for the night, and Grog retraces their steps a bit to throw around some dust of tracelessness, while Tiberius starts trying to train Lockheed a bit. Percy makes some ammunition. Keyleth studies her spells. Vex tries to get Trinket to eat some vegetables, unsuccessfully. And Keyleth casts Hero's Feast for them, while Pike tries to cast Divine Intervention for re-enchanting the Magic carpet again, but fails. As they fall asleep, Keyleth casts an anti-life shell for the first hour of sleep, while Grog does the first watch with his flaming war hammer as light, but falls asleep due to the weight of the meal consumed. Luckily, though, nothing happens. So when they wake up, they chastise him. As they collect their things and get back on their horses, they continue on their way and ride for the next 6 to 7 hours, stopping to eat along the way. Evening finds them as the sun sets, and they find a large mountain in the distance, judging that it'll take a couple hours to reach it. Keyleth has a minor panic attack as they ask her how they should approach, and Keyleth says very helpfully, well, approach as one would approach. They notice a thunderstorm above the mountain in question, and Keyleth does a nature check to figure out that the storm is stationary and not pouring any rain. She then casts Commune with Nature and discovers that the temperature gets slightly warmer the closer you get to the mountain range. The group asks if the Pyrah people are going to be friendly to them, and Keyleth says that she doesn't know. They haven't had contact with them in around 2 generations. Vax asks if the Ashari are a mix of races. She says that they are, but mainly humans, elves, and half-elves. She says that each tribe has its own cultures and traditions, and Tiberius throws some dust of illusion on himself to turn his scales silver. Vax suggests that Keyleth leads them with the twins as her bodyguards, with everyone else trailing further behind. Keyleth says that the thing she is most worried about is that when she went to the Earth tribe, she was told that her mother had passed through there when she was sent on her own Aramente. They encourage her, and she asks them not to tell the Ashari anything about their group name being the Shits before landing on the name Vox Machina. Grog points and asks, "Wait, is that Kashaw?" Keyleth looks to where he is pointing, and then he goes, "Made you look," and then laughs at his own joke to break the tension. They head toward the mountain, finding that the ground is becoming more and more inhabitable to vegetation with the smell of ash in the air. Percy says that there are two paths snaking up the mountain, and they pause to determine which one is better. They decide to take the path that is more traveled, leaving the horses behind and hidden and tied to some trees. They head up the path, but are left in darkness about an hour or two into the climb as the sun fully sets. Tiberius casts light on his staff to guide the way as some of them start coughing in the smoky air. They reach the top and spy a few shadowed figures ahead of them and all roll for stealth, but their coughing gives them away as the figures vanish from sight. Grog uses his mountain knowledge to scope it out further, and they continue on. A strange clacking sound comes from above and to the side as they see a large boulder barreling toward them down the mountainside. Vex and Trinket are forced to dodge out of the way, but it hits Vex and causes some damage. They see that three figures have gathered on the ridgeline above them and are in the process of lifting more boulders, with one of the figures sporting two heads. Tiberius casts telekinesis on the boulder that already hit them and throws it back at one of the figures. A second boulder comes crashing down, forcing them to dodge again, but it does hit Tiberius. Vex sends an arrow at one of the figures, hitting it, and then they all decide to make a bolt for it. The figures start running alongside with them, and Keyleth casts a wall of stone to block them, while Tiberius uses telekinesis to catch another boulder mid-air and hucks it back at the figures. Percy swings around and takes a shot at one of the figure's arms, making it drop the boulder it was about to throw at them on top of itself instead. The last figure waves its fists in anger as Grog recognizes the giant language it is screaming at them, telling them to come back. But they escape out of the ravine and enter into a hidden caldera in the middle of the mountain range that reveals a volcanic landscape, the heat noticeably increasing. They come upon a small forest that is clustered in the middle of the valley, as well as large obsidian stones, volcanic rocks, and glass pieces that are scattered about, seeming to emerge from the ground. Some look like they have been cleaved into, and one would assume to be for building materials. As they approach, four stone walls suddenly appear around them before closing at the top to imprison them in some sort of stone cube. Grog activates his warhammer and swings at one of the walls as Pike tries to assist with her mace. The stone stands strong, however. Vax tells everyone to wait, and a peephole appears in the front wall as two eyes come into view. A voice says, "You trespass into our home. I will ask you once your business before we let the mountain take you." Keyleth responds, "Please, I am Keyleth of the Arashari, and I am here to further my Aramente." The rest of Vox Machina kneel to Keyleth, and she rolls a persuasion check, but rolls 10. They question her further, asking her who she calls family. She tells them her father Corin and her mother Villia. She says that her mother was her predecessor and that she's following in her path. A moment later, they hear a large impact sound, and the voice calls for them to stand back as the front wall crumbles into a pile of rock to reveal about 10 individuals, all dressed in leathers and arrows tipped in obsidian. One steps forward, a bald elven man, and says that she must tell this to the flame speaker. She asks for his name, and he introduces himself as Calhoun, but says he's not the one she wishes to speak with. He leads them forward, with the rest of the druids keeping close behind them with their weapons still drawn. They reach an area where there are small huts and abodes built from the materials of the caldera, and are led through the village to the forest that sits beyond. They find that most of the trees have been petrified or are dead. Calhoun stops without saying anything, and they wait as a spray of molten rock appears from the center of the trees and a shape emerges. They see a man with sturdy build and very dark skin. As he steps toward Keyleth, he asks if she is kin of Vilya, and she says yes. He introduces himself as Serkonis, the flamekeeper of the fire Ashari, and welcomes her. He then asks why she has come, and she says that she has come to continue her Aramente after going to the Earth Ashari first. She says that her mother never returned to the Air Ashari, and he says that her presence is proof that Vilya either didn't complete the trials or is no longer alive. He says that he is sorry that her mother came through here and completed the trials successfully about 10 years ago. Keyleth says that her mother's been gone for close to 20 years. And he says that she only stayed with them for a few days. He seems genuinely regretful about the news and tells them that she was strong of heart and very well respected. Keyleth says that she was better than Keyleth is, and Serkonis says that he hopes that that's not true. He asks about her father, and Keyleth says he's doing well, stubborn as always. He asks if she trusts the companions that she brought with her, and she says yes, introducing them as Vox Machina. She says that they have proven themselves time and time again, and that they have a keep in Amon. He confirms that she is here to learn for her Aramente and asks what she seeks to know. He asks what will be her death, and she says that she's actually seen a vision of her death. She asks for the will to do what is necessary for fear of harming others. He says, then the test begins now without preparation, and asks if the group wishes to join her on the task. They say yes, and he smiles for the first time, acknowledging their willingness. He tells them to follow him as he leads them further into the trees. As they walk, Grog asks about her vision of her death, and she tells them that part of the Earth Tribe's ceremonies is a tea-induced vision quest. She says she saw two paths. One was an old woman, wise with a line of young Ashari behind her, and Keyleth ran away from her to the other path where there was a tree. She reached out and touched it, her vision connecting to the roots and how they connected to the world at large. She says that the roots took her to the rest of Vox Machina, showing them as fighting, strong and proud. And in the vision, Vax called out and said, this one's for Keyleth. She says she wasn't with them, as Grog also called out, this is for the princess, and she realized that she was the tree in that vision. She ran back to the old woman, and all of the people started fading behind her, as the old woman told Keyleth, your future is as important as it is fragile, protect it. Keyleth realized that the old woman was her, and as she came out of the vision, she spoke to the Earth headmaster, who said that if she were to survive, she needed to have the will and strength to do what is necessary. She admits to the group that ever since she accidentally killed the child, which happens pre-stream in Critical Role, it's been hard for her to find that strength. She says that she stayed longer than usual with the Earth Tribe, struggling to complete the trial because every time she used magic, she just saw flashes of the child's eyes. Tiberius asks what she wants to do now, and she says, continue on and hope I don't make a fatal mistake. Percy assures her that they've got her back as another spray of molten rock appears in the center of the trees. Vex says they'll do this together, and Grog says, we're with you till the end. She says she loves them all, and they head further into the Cinder Grove forest. They come upon the source of magma, a large crevasse bisecting the center of the forest, which is just a pool of slowly roiling lava. Serkonis instructs Keyleth to sit down and focus to ask permission. She does what he says, and the magma rises up, starting to shift into a swirling vortex. The ground shudders and bits of tree start to fall around them as Serkonis tells them to enter. Keyleth casts protection from energy on herself for fire resistance, and then Trust falls into the magma. Vax jumps in after her as Tiberius casts Stone Skin on himself and follows. The rest of them join. There's a fallen sensation, then gravity seems to shift as the magma turns into a slowly rotating tunnel of stairs, leading them downward. Eventually, they step out and find themselves in a vast, barren wasteland of cinders and ash with thin rivers of lava cutting across. Keyleth immediately recognizes that they are in the fire plane, as Serkonis' voice tells them to stay together, follow the footsteps, and find the stone spire. There they will find their trial. Keyleth tries to meditate, looking for any trace of her mother as Vex uses primeval awareness to detect any creatures around them. Keyleth detects a sense of rightness in her path, but is given no concrete directions. Vex locates a few elemental presences, including one that is flying through the sky. Tiberius shoves his bottle of air into his mouth, and Keyleth finds a sequence of small lava pools that resemble footprints. They follow them, and Vex casts Pass Without a Trace on the group as they see that the flying creature is an ancient red dragon, but it moves past them. Eventually, they come upon a singular stone obelisk with a glowing red ruby embedded into the top of it. They approach, and three figures step out from behind the spire as they recognize Sarkonis and two other druids. He tells them that they've done well, but there's not much time, pointing out the cinderstorm that is heading toward them about a mile off. He tells her to show him what she has learned as he claps his hands, and the three of them turn into massive fire elementals. They all roll for initiative, and Sarkonis goes first, darting toward the group and releasing a torrent of flame at them all, causing Percy and Tiberius to catch on fire. Vax daggers Sarkonis and takes some fire damage in the process. Vex backs away, and Hunter marks him, then shoots a hail of thorns arrow at one of the other elementals. She sends a plain arrow for her second attack, rolling a natural 20. Tiberius takes some of the fire damage at the beginning of his turn, says, "Here's something she taught me," and then uses a scroll of blight on Sarkonis successfully. He also quicken spells to Misty Step to behind Vex. One of the elementals approaches to attack Percy, while the other attacks Keyleth and Vax. Percy runs away toward Vex as well, earning an opportunity attack from one of the elementals, then stops, drops, and rolls on his way to put the fire out on him. He also does a second wind to gain some hit points back. Pike casts Guiding Bolt at Sarkonis successfully. Keyleth turns herself into a water elemental and then rushes into Sarkonis' space to whelm him. Grog rages and hits Sarkonis with his battle axe 3 times. Sarkonis attacks Keyleth, Grog, and Vax, setting Grog on fire and threatening his beloved beard. Vax takes some more fire damage at the start of his turn, uses a bonus action to disengage, runs away, then stop, drops, and rolls to put the fire out on himself as well. Vex shoots a lightning arrow at the elemental she Hunter's marked, part of it hitting Grog in the process, and then a regular arrow as well. Tiberius casts Glacial Blast against Sarkonis and one of the elementals, spending some sorcerer points to heighten the spell and give them disadvantage on their saving throw, hitting Keyleth and Grog too. The smaller elemental drops to 0 hit points, causing it to form back into the druid who had cast it. The druid transforms into an eagle and heads back to the plain gate as the other elemental attacks Pike. Percy uses his pepper box to shoot an ice shot at the elemental by Pike, but misfires, so he spends an action fixing it. Pike uses her sprinter's boots to run over to Vax, earning an opportunity attack from the elemental, but it misses. Then she heals Vax. Keyleth attacks Sarkonis with her water arms. Grog takes some more fire damage at the start of his turn, detecting the scent of burning hair, and then keeps swinging with his axe to do 3 attacks against Sarkonis. Sarkonis attacks Keyleth and Grog, and Vax daggers Sarkonis with a natural 20 on the 3rd, forcing him to drop the elemental form and turn back into his druid self. Vex Hunter's marks the remaining elemental and sends an arrow with Hail of Thorns in its direction, then shoots a regular at it as well. Tiberius takes some more fire damage at the start of his turn and asks the remaining elemental, "Do you really need me to do this?" He gets no answer, so he shoots a Glacier Blast at it and uses 2 sorcery points to cast Control Flame to juggle the fire that was encompassing his body. The elemental attacks Percy, but he uses a grip point to dodge it and then shoots it 3 times. It is forced back into its druid form as they all realize that the approaching cinderstorm on the horizon is starting to reach them. Sarkonis says that they should leave immediately and turns himself into a giant eagle before grabbing Pike and flying her toward the plain gate. They all hustle to follow him, and Keyleth drops her elemental form to cast Gust of Wind to protect them a bit as they run, but the storm encompasses them entirely, obscuring their vision. For Vex, Vax, Pike, and Grog, they get damaged by the storm, but Grog uses his stone's endurance to regain some hit points. Keyleth rolls a survival check to make sure they are heading in the right direction, leading the group, and eventually they see the portal as they all make a final constitution check against the storm. Pike and Tiberius fail, taking some damage. They reach the gate and leap through it, getting thrown into the air on the other side. It causes Percy, Tiberius, Vex, and Grog to take damage as they hit the ground, but they are safe again in the Cindergrove Forest in Pyrah. Pike immediately casts Mass Cure Wounds to help heal them all, and the magma gate closes. Serconis lifts Keyleth to her feet and tells her that she has the blessing of Pyrah behind her. He tells her to go forth and continue her Aramente, knowing that they support her. She thanks him and calls him brother. Then the other druids step forward and gift her a spark stone. When used, it will give the user the ability to cover their fists in fire in perpetuity. She says that they would like to stay around and rest before they continue on, Vex asking if they have water. Tiberius opens his bottle of water and offers it to everyone. They head out of the Cindergrove and back into the village, Serconis taking his leave. Keyleth gives the farewell Kaitiake brother, and he returns Kaitiake princess. Grog says that her people are fucking sweet, and Tiberius says he rather enjoyed that. Pike asks what Kaitiake means, and Keyleth explains that it's their salute to each other, meaning guardian or brethren. Vax asks where she needs to go next for her Aramente, and she says she needs to go to the Water Ashari next, but it doesn't need to be anytime soon because she's kind of ahead of schedule. After a night of rest, they leave the village and return to their horses, then head back to Vasselheim, where Pike returns to the Temple of Sarenrae. She finds that in her absence, the curse that was plaguing the temple site is now lifted, and the worshippers welcome her back with open arms as she has become an important figure to them. Vax says that Pickle's an important figure to them as well, and Grog agrees that she's done so much for Vox Machina, so maybe she can do much good for the worshippers as well. Pike says it's debatable, and Grog assures her that she can choose to leave the worshippers at any time, and they will kick their ass for her. Pike says her goodbyes, and Tiberius says that she will always be part of their journey no matter where she is, and Grog tells her to just keep the magic blue scry poo close in the meantime. Pike says Kaitiake to them all, and Tiberius gives her a big hug, telling her that she's his favorite gnome. She returns to the temple, and Vex says that it hurts every time as Keyleth checks out the Sparkstone more, realizing that it would even work in her beast form. And that's where they end the episode. So what do we think of this second half?
It's good. Very long, but it was good. It was a very Keyleth focused part, understandably, seeing as it was her Aramente.
Yeah.
The episode is literally titled Aramente to Pyrah.
Yeah.
So that is to be expected. I think it's really cool to see. Again, this is one of the episodes that I didn't pay too much attention to when I was first getting into it, because I didn't know what was important and what wasn't. And my main context for this before coming back and rewatching it now is how they did it in the animated series. And so it's cool to see the changes they made. I really liked how in this version they did a lot of it like together. Which I think mostly is just because like Matt didn't want like it all to be on like the entire episode focused on just like one character and wanted to give the option for everybody else to participate too. I think it was a strong choice in the animated series, the parts that like Keyleth did on her own, but I think it really speaks to the fact that she passed it with her friend's help to show that she doesn't have to do it alone. And I thought it was really strong. The battle was like strong, but I think what really showed her strength was the ways that she helped her friends make it out of the fire plane alive. Because she did a lot to do that with like the wind magic to try to protect them and like all of these things that she was doing. And I think that seemed to be, whether or not it was intentional or not, just as much a part of her test as the combat with Serconis was.
I mean, they've really come back together in the second half. Like, I feel like the first half is a lot more rocky and like reintegrating themselves into each other. This whole family dynamic that they have going on. And I think you're right in the sense of like the combat in this episode doesn't really matter. It doesn't really add much to the plot development in this,
Mm-hmm.
or even the character development in this. The combat isn't necessarily that dangerous. It doesn't like challenge them all that much either.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest factor of this episode is that family love that we're really seeing solidified
Mm-hmm.
here. Like the relationships among them is definitely the priority here.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you really see it, and even like Tiberius has his moments, like offering the water and all
Mhm.
of these things. Like, and that's
Mhm.
just cool to see with just how self-centered a character Tiberius normally is.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
this whole event even brought him in
yeah,
to
yeah.
be a little bit more selfless.
I mean, he's a Keyleth stan, let's be honest.
It's true. He really is.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that like out of the group, he would probably do more for her than he would for the rest of them.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think we see that definitely here. And I was thinking about this. We've been talking about this for a couple episodes now of like how much small seeds are being planted in terms of
Mm-hmm.
future growth in these episodes. And I think they're really in a transition period in this stream in terms of
Mm-hmm.
transitioning just from monster of the week type of dungeon crawl type adventures to more integrated story arcs. Like
Yeah.
we're seeing much more nuances and foreshadowing and the continued development of arcs over time, and we're just seeing
Mm-hmm.
the beginning of that in these episodes.
Yeah, like this is the first moment that we have like a really plot significant like thing for a character.
Mm,
Like people always talk, me
mm,
included, about Whitestone being the
mm,
first big personal arc. But
mm,
really it's this episode in Pyrah.
mm.
Because Keyleth, whereas Percy's whole backstory thing was the sort of thing that made more sense to do in like a single huge arc. Keyleth's happens in little pieces along the campaign
Mm.
as she like hits different points of her Aramente.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
there's also the whole like sight of the dragon, which is I am assuming it to be why am I blanking on his name? But the
Thordak.
Thordak, yes. I'm assuming to be Thordak,
Mm.
who is
It is. I mean, later on they confirm that that is indeed Thordak that flew over them. And
yeah.
I mean, we get that with Tyriok too. We also see
Mm-hmm.
Tyriok later on in the like much, 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 much later on in the campaign. We see him
Mm-hmm.
come back. And I mean, I'm wondering right now, like, does Keyleth's character development act as like milestones for the group?
Yeah, I think in a way it does.
Mm-hmm.
Because without getting too much into like what happens in the future, but like I know that at the point of her completion of her Aramente is around that point that a
Yeah.
lot of the other character arcs seem to be more complete and they start building up to their big sort of like final thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, I can't speak too much to that also because I'm not too much past, like I'm only just at around the point, not too much after
Mm.
when Keyleth finishes her Aramente.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Because I think in game they take a year break after she finishes.
yeah, they
So,
do. They do. That's
yeah.
about the point that I'm done, like just after that year break.
Yeah. Not a
Um,
year in real life in like
yeah,
Earth time, but a
yeah.
year in Exandria time. And Matt does a little bit of a like, what did you do during this year type
Mm-hmm.
of overview. But it really does put Keyleth's journey in a different perspective when we look at it more as like major group milestones with each touch.
Mm-hmm.
because I think it even acted as a milestone pre-stream for them as well.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, and this was even like a way to sort of introduce and tie together a lot of that pre-stream stuff that hasn't been touched on.
Yeah.
Like just the acknowledgement that there was significant stuff that happened pre-stream. Like
The
Keela's whole
thing.
vision, the whole child thing, the
Yeah.
whole like vision when she was with Earth. It makes me wonder whether or not they're going to put Earth in the animated series, if that technically happened pre-stream, or whether they're going to like make it some small thing just to help her to show it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Like, I'm really curious. I don't know if they've ever answered this, but like, was the whole Earth trial something that she role played with Matt by themselves? Like, was that like a little one shot that they did together outside of the whole group? Because was the Earth trial pre or post her joining with the rest of the group? Was it pre?
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like a lot of them didn't, like, all of this was like new information to them as well. Like they hadn't heard of the vision, when presumably if it had happened when she was with them, she would have told them after the fact.
Yeah.
But it could also be maybe she did tell them after the fact and she's just rehashing it for like the benefit of the stream. It's always like makes me curious what exactly it was that happened like pre-stream. Like they always reference like all the big events that happened, so we are aware of them. But it's just like there's so many like little pieces and so many, I'm sure, like good character development moments that are probably missing in that, even though I know that they've talked about that they took it way less seriously and it was less like plot heavy beforehand. It was just meeting up whenever they could, like every few months and stuff like that, and then just like spending hours playing D&D and goofing off together. And we see that like as they transition to streaming, as we've talked about, them getting more and more professional as they go along and like learn how to actually do this for an audience. But like it makes me wonder what context we're missing that we don't get to see that would strengthen our perspectives on these things.
Because I think that this is a very really important pivotal moment in the campaign, not just plot wise, but we are shifting the campaign to be character centric instead of plot centric, right? Because I think that's what makes the major difference. I was actually thinking about this just today. We're in the world of Candela Obscura right now, is one of the series that they're producing in real life, in Earth life in 2023. And I'm not as engaged in this series that they're producing, the Candela Obscura, and I realized today that I think it's because it's not character centric, it's more mechanic centric, it's more game mechanic centric, and I'm much more attracted to character centric stories.
That makes sense. And yeah, I think right now Candela Obscura is going through like what we've seen in the episodes before leading up to this point. Is right now they're just laying the groundwork. They're figuring out what the show is going to look like. It sounds like they're going to do more of it, because right now they said that they're doing 3 episodes with this group and then they're going to be shifting to another group. And so it seems like the sort of thing that is probably going to like grow and change and shift and probably get more character centric. I think right now they're focusing on just making sure, since this is a new game that they're producing, making sure like the audience is clear on the mechanics and everything like that. And then makes it
more than just a D&D show for us. That's what makes the brand so attractive to this massive fan base, is because it is character centric, because we learn to love these characters. And I think that's part of the reason why so many people start at this point in the campaign. Trial of the Take episodes and the Aramente episodes, and then next with the Whitestone arc that we are going into. It's because the characters are front of the action that's going on.
Absolutely. Like we've talked about what people miss when they start after like when they start after Tiberius leaves, but also like that is when it really reaches its strong point. And before, as also we've talked about, it's really clunky and like they're still figuring out a lot of things, and that can be hard to watch at times, as we have
Mm-hmm.
talked about in
Mm-hmm.
detail.
Ad nauseum.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I just think this is a really pivotal point, and we're really starting to see, like, not only is the game itself becoming character centric, but the group itself is becoming character centric.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is the first challenge that we've seen them go through so far, where the group is like, yes, we're doing this for Keyleth. We're doing
Yes.
this for this person that we care deeply about, and that's why
Mm-hmm.
we're here. We're not
Yes.
here to find gold. We're not here to slay a dragon. We're not here to escape jail. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we are here because we love and care for this person and want to support this person. And like, one of my favorite moments is the way that Liam watches Keela throughout this entire episode, like how Vax watches her. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
chef's kiss. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, it's wonderful. And then it just carries on from here through like the Whitestone arc, and then like yeah, through the Chroma Conclave arc and all of these things, it just bands around characters. And even if it's not about the individual characters themselves, it's about like the places that they've been and that they know and that they love, and
yeah,
the people they love and care
yeah.
about. And
I think that's why that caused so much drama in the first Craghammer arc with finding, fuck, what's her name? Kima.
Kima,
I was like, there's too many K words.
I'm glad that we both had a moment where we forgot a key character's name. It makes me feel better about briefly forgetting Thordak's name.
There's too many K names in my head right now. I think that's why the group had such a hard time with being motivated to save her, because they weren't personally attached to her. Like, yes, they were doing this task for Allura, who is a person that they really care for, but they couldn't yet transfer that care to Kima. And I think that's why that caused so much drama with it, like intergroup conflict among them, is because that's not a sustainable motivation, because their motivation was so detached from what they were actually doing that it was hard to sustain it. But here we're moving into an age of where the motivation is highly, highly, highly motivating, because the reasoning is because they care about these people and places.
Absolutely.
All the love.
Yes.
So what kind of personal experiences are coming up for us?
That is a good question. I think it just is like bringing up just how like person-centered I am in my own life. Like, part of the reasons why I'm drawn to these like character-driven stories, as we've talked about, is because I myself am so person-driven. Like, my whole work is centered around people. I've gotten a degree in child and youth care, and I work with like youth who are accessing a shelter. And like hearing their stories and supporting them as they try to reach like a more stable life. And like just the way that I interact with people, and like with me being so like extroverted and loving spending time with people as one of like my main favorite hobbies and all of these things, it just really, I think, circles back to just like how I live my life. So it makes sense that in my free time when I am alone, that I want to focus on other people, even if they're fictional.
Yeah. I mean, the Critical Role cast has become my family at this point. They are my friend group. Like, parasocial relationships are real.
Yeah, they really are.
They're the ones that kept me company throughout the pandemic. They're the ones that keep me company. Like, nowadays, I've seen each campaign, I think, at least twice now, if not 3 times at this point. And I mostly just keep it on in the background when I'm going about my day-to-day lives, because they are just my people that I have around me nowadays. And I think that that's just important to have. Like, one of my cry triggers is when the group, like in any story, in any show, when there's a group of people that like show up to support one person in their endeavors, like it makes me bawl like a baby. I just find it so precious. Like when the whole town rallies together and they're like, yeah, let's go support Bob, you know, like, that makes me bawl every single time. Like even if it's a like football team rallying together, you know, a whole like nation rallying together for this like one cause, like it tugs on my heartstrings because it's so gratifying, it's so fulfilling, it's so nice to see when the community comes together for one person or one cause. And I think that that's what we're seeing here in this episode, and it just makes me think of all the times where I either did or didn't have that type of support in my own life, where I felt like either I was like alone in this endeavor and like no one supported me, and like how shitty that can feel, versus the times where people did show up for me and did support me during those times, and how good that made me feel. Like it really does make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. It really does.
Yeah, I mean, finding your tribe, whether it's a D&D group or a community group or, you know, something else, it's just vital to overall well-being in general.
Community is so important, even like for people who are extreme extroverts. There needs to be some level of community, otherwise we just don't like thrive as a species. We're like social creatures.
Yeah, and I mean, found family is just such a great trope. It
My
really
favorite
is.
trope.
Yeah, I don't know. I would have to think about whether it's my favorite or not. It's probably top 3 for sure. But yeah, I think that's what appeals to us audiences time and time again about Critical Role. Not only are the characters themselves found family tropey, but like the cast. Like each person that they invite into the cast automatically becomes part of that family as well. Like we saw that with Will Wheaton and Will Friedle. We saw that with Felicia Day and Mary Elizabeth Gwynn. It's like each person that they hire on their team becomes an integral part of the family, and they support them day in and day out, and that by itself is like hella inspirational.
Yeah, and it's cool to see like nowadays what's going on in the way that like so many of the like big D&D spheres are starting to like merge together more, and just sort of like become this sort of like wider community and just like in general entertainment field. Like I mean, we've seen like Abria is a strong part of both like Dimension 20 and Critical Role, and then now has gone on to like be in like Worlds Beyond Number with Brennan and Erica and Lou, and then we Critical Role just had Emily Axford on for the first time, and Critical Role has already had many Dimension 20 people on, and or like people, even if they aren't part of the core cast of Dimension 20, people who have been on Dimension 20. And there's been a little less of that shift of Dimension 20 having Critical Role people on, but there's definitely been instances. I mean, Matt just ran Ravening War and stuff like that, and it's just kind of like cool to see those groups like generally like begin to like merge together a bit more. And I think we're going to see, as time goes on, like the flow of people back and forth become a lot more, especially as Critical Role is beginning to welcome on more long-term guests. And I know that they've talked about in the future, when they're done with their thing, they're gonna want to like pass on their name and their brand to like other groups to use to like keep it on, like, and so it's just kind of cool to see how it's just becoming like more liquid and flow. And as somebody who's a fan of all of these shows, I love it when I get to see people from one show show up on another and seeing how they interact with each other with their play styles and characters and all of that.
One of the crossovers that I actually discovered yesterday was the whole drag and D&D and Brennan Lee Mulligan crossover, which I never expected to see Brennan in drag.
Yes.
I was like, what am I seeing?
It is so cool and such a cool, like, it's really cool just to see D&D as an art form becoming more and more legitimate. And it started here with these episodes with Critical Role. Like, Critical Role was like the first big D&D show. I think Critical Role and The Adventure Zone are two who just helped very big culturally. Like The Adventure Zone being a little bit more accessible in terms of like learning the rules, and then when you actually, because the Adventure Zone also barely follows the rules in their own little play style, like have a grasp on the, like a slight functionality, like diving deeper with Critical Role to like learn all of those like deeper rules and the bigger functionings and stuff. Or at least that's how I did it. I started with the Adventure Zone first, and then Critical Role was my second D&D show that I got into. But it's just like cool to see how, I mean, these episodes that we're talking about, and I've spent the past year talking about, like, this is where it's all started, and now we're seeing it grow into these like multitude of D&D shows where it's becoming a genre and it's becoming something that's wider known, and now we're getting spin-off animated series and books and comics from various different things, and it's really cool to see, and I'm excited to see where it's going to continue to grow, because it doesn't seem like it's stopping anytime soon. I hope, one of my hopes for it is that it grows to expand to include more tabletop RPGs beyond D&D to give others more the light, but like D&D will kind of always be the root of it. And
I mean, like, that's what I was thinking about when it comes to like Candela Obscura. Like, I just want character centric TTRPGs. Like, I honestly don't really care that much about the game mechanics. Like, yes, I want to see, I've been thinking about this a lot when it comes to the difference between mechanics, is like, I want to see that trickiness of the nuance of like, well, I have this object and it increases this, and so like I get, it's a lot more nuanced in D&D than it currently is in Candela Obscura, and I like that nuance, but it also does get very wieldy at times and very cumbersome to learn, to engage with, like all of the rule bartering and all of that stuff. But I also do like those moments where the rules dictate how the game goes forward.
We've only had, sorry, I'm interrupting,
in very specific ways.
And we've only had a couple of episodes of Candela Obscura so far, but I've like had a look at the mechanics because I'm interested in running my own campaign sometime. And I think the mechanics, like especially with the way they're like harm and scars mechanics, will do some really interesting things to like character development as it goes on and as they continue showing things. I mean, I don't know whether you saw the episode all the way to the end, but just
Not
like seeing there's some big character, won't spoil anything, but there's some big character moments that happen as a result of like scars taken for some of the characters, and like those were the moments that really grabbed my attention, and I was like,
you've convinced me to finish
please
it.
Please do. It gets a little dark, as you would expect for a horror thing, but there's some really good scenes in there.
Fine, I'll finish it.
I just love the genre that Candela Obscura encapsulates, and the setting is just right up my alley, so I believe I will be a strong supporter of Candela Obscura wherever it goes, and I'm very excited to run my own game once the actual guide gets released. But enough about that, we're not talking about Candela Obscura. Or at least we shouldn't be.
It's tangentially related, for sure.
Yes.
I mean, the last question we have is, what are we being personally called to do? And yours, become a Candela Obscura fan.
Clearly, that's not even what this episode is about, but that's my calling.
I mean, I think for me, it's just focusing on the found family aspect in my own life. It's like it's so valuable, and I forget about that sometimes because I am an only child introvert. So like I do tend to spend a lot of time alone, and I'm okay with spending a lot of time alone. But it is so gratifying too, at the end of the day, to have that type of family support.
Absolutely. And for me, more seriously, aside from becoming a major Candela Obscura fan, I think it's just to like really watch it. Like, I'm at a really key point in my life right now. I believe I've talked about the fact that soon I'll be moving out of my parents' home now that I've finished university. And so, like, then I'm gonna be like moving in with roommates. I'm like just really getting started in my career, as I've been working at the youth shelter since about, technically with my practicum in September, but actually hired on in November. And just like, yeah, like this is the point when I'm really gonna start forming like my social groups and connections and all of these things. And a lot of that stuff I've started to do, but just like seeing where it goes. And also like professionally, as I'm getting more into podcasting with this show, and then there's an actual play D&D Minecraft show that I'm on that I believe I've mentioned before, but I can't remember that I actually have or not. And like just as like, because this is something that I'm really interested in, and like if other opportunities come along to like grow professionally in the D&D sphere, not that I expect to ever be like up there with Critical Role, but just to like watch the process of like from when Critical Role starts, and like seeing what I can learn from that and what I can apply to myself as I begin to like take these steps. And maybe it won't go farther than the podcast I'm in now, maybe it will, but I'd just like to see where it goes.
Yeah, I was just talking the other day about how much D&D and specifically Critical Role has impacted my writing over the years. Like I was talking to another author and I was like, yeah, I use D&D maps and stats and initiative to do my battle scenes in my books.
Oh, nice. That's really cool.
Because it's a very easy way to keep track of like, all right, who's where, like, did they already go? Do they still have to go? To like balance the combat as well and like make sure that I'm not skipping anyone. Because like once you bring more than 2 figures into it, you like start to forget where they're all standing and like all of this stuff, because it's all the theater of the mind. Like these characters don't really exist in real life beyond my brain at that time. And so it's super helpful for me to use those types of mechanics when I am creating fighting scenes. And let alone that, I mean, just following Matthew Mercer when it comes to like how to world build, that is also a huge influence in how I world build and how I build nuance and how I build like character depth, but also like environment depth as well and setting depth as well in my writing. And I mean, its impact, you can learn so much from this example that Critical Role sets.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's so much to pick up from that.
Yeah. Well, my brain feels empty, so do you want to add anything before we wrap up?
I am all good.
I'm like,
I fear if I talk... I was gonna say, I feel like if I talk anymore, it's just gonna turn into more hype about Candela Obscura and get us more off topic. So I think I better stop here.
That's a whole other podcast.
Yes, a whole other podcast.
Yeah. Well, this is powerful stuff that we're talking about. Per usual, an audience, we definitely encourage you to share your own thoughts and feelings and insights with us as well. We'd love to know how Critical Role has impacted you, whether it's the players, whether it's the characters, whether it's just the game mechanics, or whether it's just Matthew Mercer, because he is our god. So special thanks to Petall for joining me on this episode. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. As always, I love having these conversations and seeing where they go, even if we go slightly tangentially off topic.
Yeah, well, it was tangential for sure.
Yeah.
So next time we'll be discussing Campaign 1, Episode 23, Part 1, and Atlas will be joining me for that. And as always, I'm always looking for more co-hosts and guests, so if you're interested in coming on the series, please let me know and I'll send you the sign-up link. In the meantime, please comment, like, subscribe below, follow us on Tumblr at Sacred Reading CR, and until next time, may all beings be peaceful, may all beings be free, and be the chaotic good you wish to see in the world. Take care, guys.